Hey guys, Shah here, and today I wanted to briefly talk to you about the double legendary options for Guardian Druid, and more specifically about the WoWhead guide that was written and posted by Pumps a few days ago. Pumps has been a longtime guide writer for Guardian Druid and is an extremely talented player who has countless accolades and high-end content, including both Mythic Plus and Cutting Edge rating. His thoughts on Guardian Druid in regards to Covenant and Legendary pairings is excellent, and I highly recommend you read it yourself if you're interested in the rating scene at all as a Guardian Druid, since I'm not going to be covering it today in this video. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description below. On that note, he does have some comments about the best Guardian Druid and Legendary combinations for Mythic Plus, which is what we're going to be focusing today in this video. So let's just dive right in. Alright, this is what I get for not having a script, because I feel like I'm going to screw this up. I've tried to record this, I don't know, like 3 or 4 times already, spending 20 minutes talking about it, and then getting into the video editing section of this video and just hating every second of it. So here's to attempt number 5. So I do want to quickly talk about of course, the Mythic Dungeon section. Not going to be talking about Raid like I've already mentioned. So let's talk about the best Legendary combinations and Covenant combinations for Guardian Druid, because they kind of go hand in hand because of how Blizzard has kind of dealt us this, you know, shorthand. Like, yeah, you can wear 2 Legendaries, but you have to wear your Covenant Legendary. So let's talk about some of the popular ones before I get into the Legacy of the Sleeper slash the Venthyr build with Legacy of the Sleeper. Night Fae is going to be your kind of standard all-around solid defensive and offensive build. Convoke the Spirits having a shorter cooldown means you can do a bigger burst window more often. So it's going to pair very well with Heart of the Wild and going into Moonkin Infinity and like blasting a boss. The first boss of Mists always come to mind. This is a big play for a lot of higher end Guardian Druids. Will do this like Moonkin weaving while they're either kiting out mobs or if there's downtime on a boss fight or a certain mini boss. Even if you decide not to use Convoke though with Moonkin form or Feral Affinity or just Inhuman form to heal, it has really good synergy with Ursa's Fury Remembered because you're getting those instant thrash procs, which essentially leads to a fairly large absorption shield. So Convoke the Spirits becomes an even stronger 1-minute defensive cooldown. So you can rotate this with your Barkskin, your Survival Instincts, your trinkets that you're going to be using on top of Incarn. So Convoke the Spirits is going to kind of fill those gaps where you might feel a little bit more susceptible to damage. And I would recommend this Covenant for anyone who tends to spend a little bit more time in the LFG community, because Night Fae is very easy to play. You don't have to coordinate anything really with other players. The Night Fae Covenant for Guardian is also somewhat expected, so when you're invited to keys, if you're doing Mists or you're doing DOS, it's fairly common for a Guardian Druid player to be Night Fae to handle those things. So where it gets a little bit more trickier and takes a little bit more coordination are going to be the other 2 Covenants, Kyrian and Venthyr. So let's quickly just talk about Kyrian. Now, it was nerfed coming into this, going into 9.2. The Legendary was very, very strong. Some Resto Druids were seeing play. Going into 9.2, Boomkins were just slapping stuff. Their ability to partner with another DPS player who was also having a high throughput resulted in just a tremendous amount of damage. So I think the nerf kind of was targeted at Boomkins, but it is going to affect the Guardian Druid in the Mythic Plus. So what it does is it's going to give you secondary stat based on the Covenant of the player you're pairing with. So I hope that makes sense. So if you're if you're the Kyrian Druid and you're pairing with a Necrolord Frostmage, you're going to gain versatility, and they're going to gain half that versatility value that you're gaining. So you're going to gain 6%, they're going to gain 3%, and then when you empower that bond, which is a 1-minute cooldown at a baseline value, you're both going to double those values. So you're going to have 12% verse, and then your partner is going to have 6% verse. Now you can get this to a shortened cooldown, getting it down to like 30 or 40 seconds, depending on how many mobs you're hitting with the ability itself. So it can be very powerful if you're playing with something like a Frost Mage or something with very short cooldowns like a Warrior. Really cool Legendary, but the problem with Kyrian is it does take a little bit more coordination, I find. You can kind of throw it on whoever, but if they're not optimizing it, or if you're not paying attention fully to their cooldowns, it's a little bit trickier and you're going to lose out on a lot of the damage bonus that you're going to normally be getting in a coordinated group. So I think Kyrian is going to be a very strong play for high-end players. If you're looking to push keys and you have a group, I highly recommend leveling up your Kyrian Covenant and making sure you have your max conduits and having this legendary at max, because the value of the legendary is significantly powerful on the right classes under the right circumstances. It's also really good just to be able to swap to Kyrian if your group needs a Kyrian for Necrotic Wake or Spires of Ascension. I'm a big fan. I'm working on leveling up my Kyrian now on live servers. It's a little bit more difficult because you kind of have to run Ursox. In lower keys, I do run the Kindred Affinity, and I drop Ursox completely because you don't need it. But because you're able to run now both of these going into the next patch, super excited for this, and I'm excited to see some of the plays that players are going to make at the top end of the ladder. All right, let's talk about Venthyr, though, really quickly. Sinful Hysteria. This is a Boomkin legendary that Moonkin players have been using all tier. Essentially, what it's been doing is increasing the Ravenous Frenzy duration by every time you get a new application of the buff of the effect, it's going to extend it. What they're doing in 9.2 is that they're cutting that value in half, so now it's only 0.1 seconds compared to 0.2, which I guess is fair because the way it works with Guardian Druid is that your Thrash procs off of Ursox Fury Remembered give you stacks. So in essence, if it was extending it by 0.2 seconds, you would have like 30 plus seconds of uptime on your Ravenous Frenzy, which could get fairly busted. This is just an additional little buff to Ravenous Frenzy. It's about a 6 on average with Ursox Fury Remembered, about a 6-second increase to the Ravenous Frenzy, and it's giving you like those 6 seconds of very valuable high stacks of the buff. So all in all, really fun to play with. It's what's resulting with a lot of Guardian Druids being able to do really high numbers on PTR, and while it was nerfed, still very strong, and it makes your incarnation window just even more powerful than it already is. Now, the big thing I want to talk about, and probably the only thing in this article that I would disagree with pumps, is the Sinful Hysteria Venthyr legendary in pair with Legacy of the Sleeper. So Legacy of the Sleeper is a legendary that has been notorious for players who are in the RBG scene, because in rated battlegrounds and in random battlegrounds as well, flag carrying maps require one team to try to capture the other flag and bring it back to their base. Now, Guardian Druids would run this legendary for a shortened incarn cooldown window. It's bringing it from 3 minutes down to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But during that duration, you're completely immune to CC. And you also have a pretty significant damage increase, but in the PvP aspect, it was mainly so you were immune to CC, so you can't be slowed, rooted, stunned, incapacitated, feared, all of that stuff that players would do to try to slow down the flag carrier. You basically can just go full throttle, hold W for 30 seconds when you have this legendary power on and incarnation active, and it made Guardian Druids really, really powerful tanks. Now, the reason Pumps is recommending this is because, in theory, Legacy of the Sleeper gives you a flat 25% extra damage while you're in the incarnation window, and you're also going to gain 15% leech and immune to CCs, but the immune to CCs honestly isn't that important when it comes to Mythic Plus, because there's very few times the tank's actually going to get stunned. Now, obviously, like, if you got stuck in Sagadon's, like, Grasp, that might, stun you. There are a couple mobs that cast fears or have fear circles on the ground, so it will make you immune to those kind of effects, but in the most part, these type of CCs in dungeons are avoidable. So that part of the power isn't really necessary for a Guardian Druid to be successful, and on top of that, the biggest downside, I think, to this legendary is the fact that it will desync your Ravenous Frenzy from your incarnation, because now it's reducing it from a 3 minute down to a 2.5. But Ravenous Frenzy is still at a 3 minute. Therefore, you have to wait on the incarnation to be back up, or for Ravenous Frenzy to be back up so you can pair them together, or you have to play a desync. And playing desync is horrible, because then you're losing value on both the legendary, both legendaries, because while you're not in incarnation, you can't thrash every global, and because you can't thrash every global, you're not maximizing, procs from something like Ursox Fury Remembered, and you're having to kind of weave between spells, thrash, then to mangle, then to swipe, then to moonfire, then back to thrash, and you're kind of rotating, and it gets kind of hectic if you're also trying to make sure you're getting kicks, that you're not standing in frontals, that you're, pulling in the right mobs. So desyncing these creates a little bit of chaos, like a chaos window. And that's not going to be beneficial for Guardian Druids. Now, the biggest problem that I found between Ursox Fury Remembered and Legacy of the Sleeper, which you're probably seeing both of them on screen now, I'm going to try to put them in here side by side, is that Legacy of the Sleeper, unlike Ursox Fury Remembered, isn't giving you massive absorption, which means you're constantly going to be taking damage, and you're typically not going to be able to leech as much damage as you're doing for the damage that you're taking. So an absorption is always going to be better than actual healing. That's why Earth Warden is such a powerful effect. That's why Disc Priest, Spirit Shells, and Raid is so powerful, because it's the damage prevented is much better than the damage healed. So what I found with Legacy of the Sleeper, at least in solo content, is that obviously you have to spend some of those globals healing yourself, or spending a couple more globals kiting or not within melee range. And because of these other abilities you're now required to use to stay alive with Legacy of the Sleeper, you're not able to actually fully utilize the incarnation window as well as the extra damage that you're going to be gaining from the legendary. Now, because of that, Ursa's Fury Remembered, actually because of its proc chance with Thrash, and because of the chance you're actually able to hit Thrash almost every global for 30 seconds, boring, but still really, really strong, and actually tends to yield a higher damage output than Legacy of the Sleeper. Now, of course, in lower keys, there's opportunities for you to pull really big. Your healer can kind of just keep a hot on you if you're in really high item level gear, or you have a really solid group. Like, of course, you can run Legacy of the Sleeper in lower keys, but I think when it comes to the meta and what's going to be valuable, Ursa's Fury Remembered, I think, hands down, is going to be the best legendary choice. And you're going to basically run whichever covenant you feel is appropriate for A, your group, or 2, the key that you're running. So I just want you guys to know, if you are reading through this, or you have read through this and you saw this combination, don't think that this is going to instantly rise and maybe it's like a sleeper, no pun intended, as a sleeper legendary and it's going to rise to the top. There's no way that Ursa's Fury Remembered is actually going to get outshined by any other legendary, despite the potency of the damage aspect of Legacy of the Sleepers. Lower keys, if you're messing around with damage, trying to go for as much damage as possible, yeah, I think in some AoE situations with the right group and under the right circumstances, it can yield in a little bit higher damage output. But throughout my testing, Ursa's Fury Remembered was more consistent, led to on average about 2-ish extra seconds of Ravenous Frenzy, and typically yielded to higher damage, because you get into this whole like conversation and convoluted topic of probability, and probability has a lot of different aspects to it, and the chance of it proccing the Thrash can be really high and it can be really low, so your damage will fluctuate a little bit more, but the stacks that you're going to be gaining from Sinful Hysteria are fairly consistent, and the damage yielding from Ursa's Fury Remembered will on average be higher than Legacy of the Sleeper. That's pretty much it. Necrolord, I'm sorry, your legendary is just super undertuned. You can run Ursa's Fury Remembered, you'll obviously run your legendary for Necrolord. It's just pushing high keys, probably not going to be anything that's feasible unless you are swapping around covenants or your group is just on crack cocaine. But of course, I'm hoping that Blizzard like understands that Necrolord isn't being played, and that they maybe do some reworking or retouching to the legendary, because I think Necrolord is a really cool covenant to play as bear, and I wish it was able to see more shine in the meta than it currently is seeing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like I mentioned, I am going to be doing a full TLDR Guardian Druid guide coming out in the next week or so, now that the 9.2 was announced finally. So if that's something that interests you, because you hate reading like I do, feel free to subscribe or check out my Discord, which will be in the link below, and keep an eye out for that post. I hope you guys are all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.